Imagine being so rich that your grandson gets kidnapped and you refuse to pay the ransom. Not because you don't have the money, but because you're negotiating over your own flesh and blood. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of J. Paul Getty, the man who was once declared the richest private citizen in the entire world. And trust me, his story is darker and more fascinating than you could ever imagine. What's up, everyone? Today, we're diving deep into the life of a man who redefined what it means to be wealthy. We're talking about J. Paul Getty, an oil tycoon whose net worth was estimated at over $25 billion in today's money when he died in 1976. But here's the twist. Despite having more money than most countries, he was known as one of the cheapest, most frugal billionaires who ever lived. So how did a man from Minnesota become the richest person on earth? And why would someone with that much wealth install a payphone in his own mansion? Stick around, because this story has more twists than a Hollywood thriller. TBHOVOAEMPR Jean Paul Getty was born on December 15, 1892 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But unlike most of us, Getty wasn't starting from zero. His father, George Getty, was an attorney who transformed himself into a successful oilman after discovering mineral rights opportunities in Oklahoma. Picture this, it's 1903, and young Paul is just 10 years old when his father travels to Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and purchases the mineral rights for 1,100 acres of land. This single decision would change the Getty family forever. Paul grew up watching his father strike oil, and by age 11, he witnessed his first oil strike. He later described it as a unique thrill, something that got into his blood. During summer breaks from school, young Getty would follow his father into the Oklahoma oil fields, learning the business from the ground up. After studying at Oxford University in England, where he developed a love for European culture and art, Getty returned to America in 1914. His father gave him $10,000, equivalent to about $300,000 today, to invest in expanding the family's oil operations. And here's where Getty's genius showed itself. He bought his first oil well site near Haskell, Oklahoma. The well, called Nancy Taylor No. 1, struck oil in August 1915. By the following summer, the production royalties from that single well had made him a millionaire at just 23 years old. Think about that for a second. 23 years old and already a millionaire in 1916. That would be like making tens of millions today before you could legally rent a car! BLDNEEMPR, but Getty didn't stop there. After his first million, he actually retired for a while to enjoy life. But the oil business kept calling him back. Throughout the 1920s, he added roughly $3 million to his fortune, systematically buying up struggling oil companies during the Great Depression when prices were at rock bottom. Getty had a strategy that was ahead of its time. He didn't just drill for oil, he bought entire companies. He acquired Pacific Western, Tidewater, and Skelly Oil. He purchased the Hotel Pierre in Manhattan. He even took over Spartan Aircraft during World War II at the Navy's request and turned it around completely. But the real game changer came in 1949. Getty made what many call the insane gamble. He paid King Ibn Saud of Saudi Arabia almost $10 million in cash for drilling rights to a desolate stretch of sand between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. It was land where oil had never been found. For 4 long years, Getty poured money into that barren wasteland. $30 million invested, 0 oil found. People thought he'd finally made the mistake that would ruin him. Then, in 1953, they struck black gold. And not just a little. 16 million barrels per year started flowing from that supposedly worthless land. That single bet transformed Getty from merely rich to incomprehensibly wealthy. By 1957, Fortune magazine named him the richest living American. In 1966, the Guinness Book of World Records declared him the world's richest private citizen, with an estimated net worth of $1.2 billion. That's over $8 billion in today's money. Getty owned controlling interests in nearly 200 businesses. He had built an empire so vast that money itself seemed to become meaningless to him. Each paradox of Welch, but here's where Getty's story gets really strange. Despite having billions, J. Paul Getty was legendary for his extreme frugality. And I'm not talking about clipping coupons or driving an old car. I'm talking about behavior that shocked even other wealthy people. Getty purchased Sutton Place, a 72-room mansion in England, for £60,000, about half of what the previous owner had paid for it decades earlier. He moved there in 1959 and spent the last years of his life in this two-door estate near Guildford. And here's the kicker: Getty installed a payphone in the mansion for his staff and guests to use. That's right, a payphone, in his own home. Why? Because he didn't want to pay for other people's phone calls. His secretary even claimed that Getty washed his own laundry by hand because he didn't want to pay to have his clothes laundered. Getty would haggle over everything. Luxury hotel suites, artwork, real estate, you name it. He had to get the absolute lowest price possible. It became almost pathological, this need to save money despite having more wealth than he could ever spend. Some people called it smart business. Others called it madness. But the most infamous example of Getty's frugality would come in 1973, and it would shock the entire world. On July 10, 1973, 16-year-old John Paul Getty III. Getty's grandson was kidnapped in Rome by a Calabrian crime organization. The kidnappers demanded $17 million for his safe release. When Getty received the ransom demand, he refused to pay. At first, the family thought maybe the teenager had staged his own kidnapping to extort money from his grandfather. But as weeks turned into months, the situation became horrifyingly real. 4 months later, a package arrived in the mail. Inside was a human ear along with a lock of hair and a note that read, "This is Paul's ear. If we don't get some money within 10 days, then the other ear will arrive. In other words, he will arrive in little bits." Even then, Getty negotiated. The kidnappers reduced their demand from $17 million to $3.2 million, then down to $3 million. Getty's response: he agreed to pay only $2.2 million, the maximum amount that would be tax deductible under Italian law. For the remaining $800,000, he loaned it to his own son at 4% interest. Let that sink in. He loaned his own family money, with interest, to save his grandson's life. Getty later defended his decision by saying he had 14 other grandchildren, and paying the ransom would make them all targets for copycat kidnappers. He also argued that giving in to criminals would only encourage more violence and terrorism. His grandson was eventually released, traumatized and maimed. When the boy called to thank his grandfather, Getty wouldn't even come to the phone. But there was another side to J. Paul Getty that often gets overshadowed by stories of his cheapness. He was a passionate and knowledgeable art collector. He spoke multiple languages fluently, German, French, and Italian, and had a deep understanding of art history and European culture. Getty founded the J. Paul Getty Museum in 1954, initially housed at his ranch in Malibu. He later built a magnificent replica of an ancient Roman villa to house his growing collection, inspired by the Villa dei Papiri in Herculaneum, Italy. The irony: Getty approved every single acquisition for the museum until his death, but he never actually visited it after it opened to the public. He stayed in England, managing his business empire from afar, and never returned to California after 1951. When Getty died on June 6, 1976, he left more than $661 million to his museum. Today, the J. Paul Getty Trust operates the Getty Center and Getty Villa in Los Angeles, and it's one of the wealthiest art institutions in the world, attracting millions of visitors every year. Getty was buried at the Getty Villa in California, in a gravesite that remains closed to the public, mirroring how private and solitary his life had become. So what's the real story of J. Paul Getty? Was he a brilliant businessman who built an empire from calculated risks and iron discipline? Or was he a tragic figure who had everything money could buy but missed what truly mattered? The truth is probably both. Getty achieved a level of wealth that most people can't even comprehend. He built institutions that will preserve art and culture for generations. But he also became a prisoner of his own fortune, unable to trust anyone, unwilling to part with money even when it mattered most, and ultimately dying alone. Thousands of miles from the country where he'd built his empire, his life raises an uncomfortable question. At what point does the pursuit of wealth stop being a means to an end and become the end itself? Getty had enough money to buy almost anything, but he couldn't buy back time with his family or the simple human connections that make life meaningful. That's the story of J. Paul Getty, the wealthiest private citizen of his time. A man who proved that you can have all the money in the world and still be poor in the ways that truly matter. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories about history's most interesting figures. Drop a comment below and let me know. Would you sacrifice everything for wealth like Getty did? Or are some things in life truly priceless? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.